Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for being here this evening. We do have a guest coming on. Josh is going to be joining us shortly. For those of you here to see Josh, he's operating on a Windows 95 computer. It won't boot up. He can tell you about the issues here when he gets here. But I appreciate you guys joining us. This is Live at 5 here to answer real estate, mortgage-related questions, help guide you through that process. Really make sense of a lot of the craziness out there in the housing market. So, if you have something, housing related, mortgage related, you want to talk trash on Josh, just put it in the comments and we'll read it aloud and hopefully address those for you. As I always do, want to talk a little bit about inventory here, right? So we've seen the recent updates with regards to, inventory increasing in markets across the United States, housing slowing, so on and so forth. So every week I update you on what's happening here locally in Orange County, where I'm located, just to give you an indicator of what's happening in my market. You might not be here, but at least it gives you an idea while everybody's saying inventory is going up, whatever, to give you a basis, to let you know exactly what's happening. So here locally, Orange County, we're at the lowest level of inventory active properties on the market that I've seen in probably 4 to 5 months. I think we're just over 2,100 at the moment. And there's Josh. There he is. He came in, Windows 95, finally booted up for him.
Listen, it's Windows 11. I'm on the bleeding edge, so it's giving us problems.
Are you operating? Which camera are you on? That thing looks grainy. Doesn't look good. Quality's off.
No, you're wrong. Incorrect.
Okay. Well, where I was going, guys, lowest level I've seen in Orange County real estate in quite some time. Today, we were just around 2,100 properties, which if you guys have been hearing me talk about this a couple weeks ago, we were at 2,600. We're down 2,100. 20% almost off with regards to inventory levels here in Huntington Beach. I think as of today, we had 144. We got as high as 170. We're about halfway in between where the lows were and where the highs were over the last couple of months. So we're in between. So properties are coming on, but there's still a lot of activity out there. In addition, we got pending home sales numbers today. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of videos on that probably over the next couple of days. National Association of Realtors, 8.1% increase in pending home sales. Now, pending home sales are a leading indicator, right? Because they're properties that are going into escrow. They're not closed sales. They're properties that are going into escrow. And we increased after 2 months of declines. We actually went up. We went up 8% from last month, but we're still quite a bit down from where we were a year ago, which honestly is to be expected to some extent, just because of how crazy things were in housing back a year ago. But, again, if you just read the headlines a month ago, you would have thought the world was ending, but now yet everybody's back in buying property. But we have seen some changes in rates. Josh, I know we're going to talk about rates, but anything you want to start with today while coming in?
No, nothing big other than we're really still looking for a bottom. It was interesting. We got a little bit of a head fake last week when we were on. We had the Fed meeting. We had talked about the last 4 Fed meetings or so had been bad for interest rates. And last week we saw a knee-jerk reaction where we were off, and then it came right back by the end of the day to unchanged, led us to believe that there wasn't going to be much impact or much movement. But starting Thursday, Friday, and then follow through on Monday, rates are a chunk worse, maybe as much as 0.25%. Still very good, but about 0.25% worse from last week. And when we look at the boring charts that no one likes to see, we still don't look like we've put in our worst levels. So don't really have any expectation of rates shooting up or going to the moon, but they're definitely higher than they were last week, and could see a few more weeks of them worsening.
Got it. All right. And again, inflationary concerns, right? I mean, Powell has come out and said that he expects inflation to last longer than originally expected. Again, we've talked about the number of ships off the coast of California. They just continue to build. It's incredible. I'm waiting for a clear day. A lot of you guys don't realize that, living by the coast, say in Huntington Beach, we have the LA port, the Los Angeles port, and the Long Beach port. Not very far from us. So a lot of these container ships that are coming from China, coming from these other countries, are docking in LA and Long Beach to let this, to get the containers emptied, at which point they ship them out and to Amazon, whoever's buying it, right, across the US. And, being by the coast, a lot of times you get a marine layer. It's not really clear off the ocean, but 2 days ago, it was super clear and you could see these. I mean, it was amazing how many of these boats were out there. And I wanted to take a picture, but I was driving and I was like, I'll go back and do it. And when I went back, it was foggy. So I'm waiting to do it so I can actually post it on here to show you what I'm actually talking about, and you guys get an idea of how backed up these things are. So
and if you've
anyway,
never seen a container ship, not up close because they're half mile off the coast here, but even from the distance, it's spectacular how massive these things are.
it honestly, like I was going down the some our streets kind of run parallel and perpendicular to each other, like like squares, if you will. And so a lot of the roads lead straight to the beach. Like you're going down the street, and directly in front of you is the coast. And you're driving at night, it looks like there's a city off the coast, because I mean these container ships are so big and have so many lights on them that it looks like a cruise ship is sitting off the coast there, when in fact it's nothing. It's a boat with a lot of boxes on it. But anyway, you guys are just joining us. Let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. And maybe a little bit what you're seeing in your market. It kind of helps us in having these conversations. And another thing I want to just throw out there, because this is going to sound crazy coming from someone that posts a lot of content on YouTube and tries to update people and stay in the loop and keep you guys in the loop. But I think a lot of home buyers out there get too caught up in this sort of thing, right? And what I mean by this is every day they feel like they need a market update. Every day they feel like they need to know where rates are going. Every day they feel like they need to know what happened with pending home sales or existing home sales, or every month they're following that. It's a catch-22, right? I mean, once you decide that you're going to purchase a home and you start the process, I don't think you need to follow the market updates every day. It's like watching a stock every single day after you've purchased it or getting ready to purchase it. You'll drive yourself crazy. I think, there's too much information going back and forth. You got too many people out there essentially contradicting each other, to be completely honest. Half of them have no idea what the hell they're talking about to start with. It's confusing. And so I think, a lot of buyers come on here and have these questions, and then we answer them, and then they might go on a channel and do the same thing somewhere else and get conflicting information and never get anywhere. So, not telling you to stop watching YouTube, but once you've made a decision to purchase or buy a home or whatever, just move, kind of get in the rhythm of doing that and stop worrying about, what's going to happen next week or the following week or whatever. But anything, Josh, do you want to add to that?
No, I would just say, you and I were talking earlier, Adam Data came out with a number, and the headline is accurate, but then when you dig into the data, you say, what does it mean? Headline says home affordability slips again for average workers across U.S. in third quarter amid ongoing price run up. And then you dig down to it and you're like, what do they mean? It says median price single family homes are less affordable in the third quarter compared to historical averages in 75% of counties across the nation. Like, okay, well, that's a blinding flash of the obvious there. 75% of counties are more expensive than historical averages. Well, we know we're towards the high end of a price trend. If you look back, in 2010, I was screaming from the mountaintops to anyone in Southern California, please, please, please buy a home. Homes in sort of my home market where I started doing a lot of loans back in the 90s. In Anaheim, you could buy a nice home for less than $300,000. The mortgage with an FHA loan on that at that time was less than what it would cost to rent that house. So if you could come up with the $10,000 down payment, get a lender credit for your closing costs, you own for less than what it costs to rent. So that's factored in those averages of the last 30, 40 years. What we really need to look at, First American Research came out with their numbers about 2-3 weeks ago, and we are 40% more affordable than the last time the market peaked. And we talked about this a little bit last week. That number is a little bit inflated of where things were at the last peak, because we went beyond what people could afford due to stated income loans. So there is a wall that we will hit at a certain point. And if we're 40% more affordable than we were at the last peak, we're probably 20% more headroom of where we could go before we start running out of buyers. So it does happen, and that's why Jeb and I bang the drum every week that we are hoping and praying that home price appreciation slows, because we don't want to hit that ceiling. And if we appreciate it 3 or 4 or 5% a year, It doesn't mean that we hit that ceiling in 4 or 5 years, because the ceiling increases as average wages increase over that time. So just long way of saying, piggybacking on what Jeb was saying, don't look at every piece of news. And if you do look at news, don't look at the headline. They're trying to make you read the article. Dig into the data and see what it's actually saying. What I just read you was an alarming headline. When you look into the data, it's very obvious what they were stating, but they wanted someone to read their article, so they had to present it in a really sensational way.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I mean, that's how a lot of clickbait or media headlines work, right? It's there to grab attention, and then in the article you either explain it or you don't, and if you don't, then obviously it's more clickbait than anything else. But with that said, we do have Nightbot in the chat, and already deleting people's comments for spamming caps. So don't type in all caps, otherwise the comment might get deleted. Jennifer Lego is here also moderating, and she'll get you out of here quick like. And
which one's more aggressive, Nightbot or Jennifer?
I think Jennifer. Jennifer draws in the thumbs down too. It's great. Just gets a lot of animosity in here. But anyway, let's talk. Let's do some questions here. If we have any. I know we're getting down here. Thank you guys for being here. So thoughts on San Diego housing in relation to what we're seeing up here in Orange County. So San Diego and Orange County are pretty similar markets. San Diego is, kind of hypes itself is the best weather in the world, right? I mean, a little bit more desirable than here in Orange County. And just throwing that out there is a little fact, but I mean, the housing market has done very, very well. And in fact, one of the top markets, I think in the top 2 or 3 across the country with regards to appreciation, probably going to see a similar market over the next 12 months or so. Maybe not in the percentage of appreciation, but I think you're still going to have buyers. It's always going to be a desirable city. But affordability and other factors start to play in there, and that's what will slow that market down more so than anything else, along with low supply. And so I know supply is an issue there. I know a handful of agents that work that market all over San Diego, and talk to them often, and they're experiencing essentially what we are here in Orange County. So until something changes on that front, you're not really going to see much change in that market either, which means that you're probably going to get gradual appreciation over the next couple of years would be my guess.
And Jeb, the one thing I would add to that, it'll probably moderate a little bit more than other areas, just because we've talked about it before on the show. Why has San Diego appreciated higher? Is it that people like San Diego more than Orange or LA County? It's possible, but most likely they like it similarly and realize that it was priced more affordably. So if you can be in any of those locations, see them as roughly equivalent. San Diego does have awesome weather, but you could buy a home for $100,000 less, you go there. They've been appreciating at about 10% higher annually than Orange and LA counties have. As those get more equal, then people stop having the incentive to move to that market. So it may moderate a little bit more, but it's always going to be desirable.
Well, let's just throw this one up there too, because I mean, you kind of touched on this in that statement. And Ishmael's asking about Riverside County. So Riverside County is a little northeast of us here in Orange County, and the reason it's been crazy is because it's more affordable, right? There's more properties out there that meet the price point in which people can afford. You can get more bang for your buck, if you will, a little bit more inventory to choose from initially anyhow. So that market saw crazy appreciation. But what you'll see is as the market starts to slow, traditionally speaking, those markets will slow sooner than the coastal areas like Orange County. So, but with that said, asking thoughts on Riverside, I think go ahead. I mean, go ahead. Yeah.
No, where I was going to jump in on that, there's a critical difference. Inland counties, Riverside, San Bernardino, are not equivalent in terms of San Diego. San Diego still has the ocean.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It may be further away economically from Orange and LA County, but they have a pretty robust economy and they have the oceans. They're not as dense. There's more room for them to build. So there's reasons why that makes sense. Generally, when people go inland, it's because of lower prices. They're priced out of the community. So you still have that. There's a greater affordability level, so they have more room for home prices. Doesn't in any way take away from the fact that you were stating that it will decrease first. but it's just there's a different reason why people are going inland, so it's a little bit of a different dynamic. On top of that, you have the crazy thing that Riverside and San Bernardino have much lower loan limits. We can't do high balance loans out there, so currently you're capped at
Very important.
548, 250, and FHA even lower. So we're going to see a big increase to those loan limits. We've talked about it here on the show. We have 2 lenders this last week, major national lenders, that jumped the gun and said we'll do 625 standard balance loan. So that 548, 250, they're saying they're going to go at least to 625. So between now and December 1, sometime around Thanksgiving, we'll get the official number, and it's going to be at least 625, probably a little bit higher than that. But 2 major lenders are doing loans at 625. But before we get too far off topic, just that's a reason why the Riverside County and other inland areas stay a little bit lower. It makes it harder to qualify. You end up in jumbo loans that wouldn't be jumbo anywhere else, require a bigger down payment. So we're going to see a little bit of a pop when you see those increased loan limits. But I didn't mean to jump in on you, Jeb, other than just point out that there's a difference between Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego, even though they're both adjacent to LA, Orange County, and lower priced.
Yeah, and so just to get back there, Riverside, you're going to continue to see what you've seen, right? I mean, you're not going to see much of a change in that market. People are still priced out of Orange County, still priced out of LA, still priced out of San Diego in some regards. And so you're going to get more people coming out there just because they can get more property, and they might actually be able to find a property in some cases. So I don't think you're going to see much changes. As you start to see supply increase everywhere, that market will slow down, probably again before the coastal areas, in my opinion. But we haven't gotten there yet, so I would say just hang tight. You're not going to see much change over the next couple of months, because I've said this before, and I believe it. As you get closer to the end of the year, inventory is going to continue to go down. You're not going to see an increase in inventory from these levels, and I don't think you are. Just because it's that time of year when things traditionally slow down, and I think you're starting to get back on track. So time will tell. Time will tell. Michael DeRee. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say Ismail, but let's go back to Michael. But Ismail had a nice follow-up. I kind of like where he's going here. Again, Riverside County, do you think I should do 3% down payment if possible in this market, or continue to save money and wait? Like we've gone through this probably 10 times on the show in the last year. Home values will appreciate at a much faster rate than you can save money. So if we're waiting to get to a 5% down payment, even most everything Riverside County, what would you say, Jeb's a minimum 500,000. So an additional 2% to get from 3% to 5%, you have to save an additional $10,000. That could take a year for most people. Let's say it takes 6 months. If that $500,000 home goes up more than 2% in the next 6 months, it's gone up more than what you saved. So if you can qualify and you can do a 3% down payment, absolutely get in now, because the values are going to continue to go up faster than what most people can save.
There you go. All right. So we're going to move on from Ishmael here and get into some other questions. So I got a question for you guys. Quick like. So do you like it better when we're like this and the question's at the bottom, or does it look better when it's like that and the question's at the bottom?
They might answer, can we put emojis over those guys' faces?
So this is 2. This is 1. So do you like 1 or 2? Just simple. I mean, Josh's background kind of sucks, but other than that, would love to know your thoughts. So anyway, we're moving on. Michael DeRee, longtime follower here. How many times can my credit be pulled for mortgage purposes before it drags my credit score down? And then he goes on to talk about Josh's computer being the same places that he gets his shirts, which is the 90s.
Well, the interesting part is I got this boring gray shirt out of Michael's closet, and he still talks trash about my shirt when I'm wearing his boring attire.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So Josh, how many times can you pull credit within that 45-day window?
So the CFPB posts on their website that you have 45 days on a mortgage credit report to have as many mortgage credit reports as you pulled. Now, I've seen conflicting information that says each of the 3 bureaus handles it differently. So it could be as short as 30 days. If you want to be really safe while you're shopping for a mortgage, get them in within a 2-week time frame. 30 days should be safe, still quite safe, and 45 according to the CFPB on their website. But I have seen that each of the three bureaus handles it differently. If we're pulling a mortgage credit report, we're going to pull all three. So you could see your mileage may vary depending on the bureau. So I would say do your best to keep it within a 2-week window. I wouldn't worry about it within a 30-day window, and you're probably safe within a 45-day window.
Got it. All right. And the folks have answered. One seems to be the consensus here. We had a couple of twos, but ones are people want to get up close and personal, they said, Josh.
I was going to say, do you remember which one is?
Yeah, one was this. So up close and personal. So this is what we're going to stick with, my friends. Jennifer has a question for Josh. For an applicant considered a credit risk, how much of an increase on the base mortgage interest should he or she plan for? A plan to have 10% down. Thanks.
So let's kind of start with, how do we define credit risk? That's not really a term that's used in mortgage underwriting. It's truly binary. It's yes or no. FHA, VA, Fannie, Freddie. Are you eligible? Can we get you approved through an automated system or a manual underwrite? From there, there's a matrix that tells us that there's loan level price adjustments or hits for going lower and lower on the credit score. So if you get low enough on the credit score that we can still approve you, but it has to go manually, now you're sort of in a different area where you're going to pay a significantly higher premium in the interest rate. But it really comes down to where that score is. And people always ask, okay, well, cool, where is it? Well, Fannie and Freddie, their matrix breaks it down every 20 points from the 620, which is your low to be eligible, all the way to 740, which is their high. That's the best you can get. And it also varies by loan to value. If you're putting 50% down and you have a 650 credit score, you're still going to get a really good interest rate. If you're putting 10% down, you have a 650 credit score, it's going to hit you pretty heavily. Now, if we're looking at FHA and VA loans, our first threshold, we want to make sure we have above 640. That's going to get you a good rate. Above 680 in most cases is going to get you the best rate. There are a few lenders out there that will improve it all the way up to 720, 740, but for the most part, 640 and 680 on government loans. Every 20 points, it's going to get better all the way up to 740 on a conventional loan. So it doesn't really answer your question, and because that matrix is fairly complicated, you're talking 10% down, and we need to know where that score is. It's going to be very different at 620 versus 700. So shoot me an email, Jennifer. I think you have my email address. If not, Jeb will put our pretty banner up there with our email addresses. Send me the info, and I can get you a specific answer on your specific situation.
All right, there you go. Al has a question here. Another longtime follower here, saying, "Is it true that FHA loans don't allow for an appraisal gap to be written into the contract, or they can't be enforced?" So with FHA, VA, you have an amendatory clause essentially that says that the buyer does not have to move forward if the appraisal doesn't come into value. Now, does that keep them from writing an appraisal gap, Josh?
It doesn't, nothing prevents you from doing it, but I think the second piece of the question there is, or they can't be enforced. We have another document in the same contract that says, I acknowledge that the borrower can't be compelled to complete this transaction if the value doesn't come in. I've never seen one of these going to court, but you have a contract with two conflicting clauses in there. FHA obviously wouldn't fund the loan against a borrower's wishes. So it comes down to a lot of things. Jeb, how many times have we talked about what happens in this situation? Can I sue the seller? Can I sue the buyer? Generally, the cost of suing and the time lost in tying the property up exceeds any benefit of it. My take is you can agree to pay and cover an appraisal gap with an FHA, and you could still use that amendatory clause to get out of the transaction. And most agents lean towards feeling the same way and saying, hey, great that they're offering to do it, but at the end of the day, we can't compel them to do it if they don't want to.
No, there you go. Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. Liz is asking about backup offers. What do you think about backup offers? Worth it? Were the backup and they had their inspection today, option ends 10-1, rip the Band-Aid off and move on, question mark. So let's talk a minute about a backup offer. What is it? So a backup offer is essentially when you know, there's multiple offers on a property, they accept one, and then they say, you know, we're going to hold yours as a backup in case something happens with the initial offer. Then essentially you would be our offer. We'll move forward with you. In my experience, you know, with clients, I will tell you, like a lot of multiple offer situations, we often tell buyers, hey, listen, we'll hold your offer for a backup or whatever without actually fully executing a true backup. Because in this environment where there's a multiple offer situation, there's very little risk of not signing that backup, because if you go back to market, chances are you're going to get multiple offers and do the same thing again. Traditionally, you would sign a backup in the case that you didn't really have a lot of offers or a lot of other options out there. Therefore, if something falls apart, you can move forward with the backup, so on and so forth. I've been doing this 20 years. I've been the backup a handful of times. I've been backup many times and only been, moved to top position, if you will, a handful out of all of that. So I would tell you at this point, if they've done their inspection, if you don't hear something in the next little bit, or if the property was a nice property and you didn't really expect anything in the inspection, I would tell you probably best interest to move on. Because at the end of the day, if you're merely waiting on that property to move on with your search and whatever, I would absolutely tell you to move on. Now, if you're out there looking at other properties and still haven't found one, or maybe you're writing offers and nothing's clicked and you're a backup, then who cares, right? I mean, you're still in that position. If something falls out, you're there. But if for whatever reason you're holding on to that or not moving forward because of that one, I would just tell you I think you're in your best interest to move forward. I think in my experience, most properties that go under contract, typically, if it doesn't fall out after the first couple of days, it's going to take something much bigger to do that. So, move on.
And again, the counterpoint to that, everything that Jeb said is 100% correct. I've had 2 clients out of a couple hundred loans this year, 2 clients who got their home in a backup situation. So it does happen. So you're committed to this. I wouldn't stop looking at other homes in case you found something came up, but I also wouldn't say, hey, we're out of the running, we're not interested in this, because it's a very small minority of the time, but it does happen where they move on to a backup offer.
No, absolutely. And Johnny has a question here. Question I don't know that we've encountered before, but a good question. Do you recommend to buy a nice big home in a not so great part of town, or a smaller, uglier home in a great part of town? Almost priced out of the market, so I need to buy soon. So I think this is a personal preference, right? I mean, here's what I would say for sure is, if you can buy that nice big home in the not so great part of town, and there are plans to potentially regentrify or redo that part of town at some point in the future, that's a win-win, assuming they actually follow through with that. I mean, we had a little bit of that here in Costa Mesa, if you will, like the west side part of Costa Mesa. It wasn't a bad part, but it wasn't the east side closer to Newport. And over the years, it's just been regentrified, new construction, a lot happening. And what was, initially not really desirable has become very desirable, just because of the direction it's headed. So if you're in one of these markets that has, cities that has plans to maybe do that in the future, or you could see it going that direction, that's something you need to consider. But also consider things like, do you have kids? How are the schools? Like, does it matter if you're in a bad area versus a good area with regards to that sort of thing? If you go to resell it and that area hasn't changed, resell value might hurt you in a market where there's more supply, right? When there are more opportunities out there, and people don't have to necessarily pick the bad part of town because they have options in the quote unquote good part of town. So just keep that stuff in mind when you're buying a property. But I mean, there are people that desire to live in areas that you may not, want to live in for whatever reason. So I would say it's a personal preference. But the idea is always to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. Typically speaking, I mean, that's kind of the old school real estate lingo is you want the worst property in the best neighborhood. That way you can fix it up and make it one of those other properties. So, just take all of that into consideration when you're making that decision. Josh, what are your thoughts on that one?
All of that, kind of going back, you used a great example of Westside Costa Mesa, but let's even start and talk about how that works. First off, coming out of the down market in 2008, 2009, Newport Beach was reasonably affordable, rapidly got out of hand. So a lot of the people that wanted to be in Newport went to Eastside Costa Mesa. Eastside Costa Mesa rapidly got out of hand. Those people that want to be in that area and like those amenities started looking at West Costa Mesa. So when you see a similar trend, are some of these lesser areas, are they trending up? Are you seeing newer, better businesses going in those areas? What are you looking at, and how do the neighbors in the area look at? Like I've talked about this before, even in my neighborhood, when we bought in, like our neighbors were like, how in the world could you afford that house? Because they'd all been there for 20, 25 years. Now I've been there almost 20 years, and you see a house turnover and you see a younger couple move in, you're like, how in the world did they afford that? So a lot of these areas, you're seeing the same thing. Are the newer people moving in driving nicer cars, seem to have better jobs, and then all of that? So from that perspective, just look around. I wouldn't necessarily be 100% afraid of a lesser area, but if it's a lesser area for a reason and you don't see those signs of things turning around, then take a smaller home, especially if it's something that you could build onto later on as you have some equity. We see that a lot in these markets. Little home on a nicer, larger lot, you can always make it nicer for yourself in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying in an area, and this is the last thing I'll talk about this, like that has businesses that are all vacant, there's, things are run down, that sort of thing, you may not consider it. But if there's businesses there, there's, things are moving forward, it's just not, quite as good as the other area, then I think it's less of a concern. But when you start to see bigger picture, bigger issues with vacancy, and that could be something that you really take into consideration when making that decision. All right. So hi y'all. Says, I just bought my second home 2 weeks ago. How long do I have to wait to cash refinance my first, Josh?
Really, on this one, we just need more information. There's nothing preventing you from doing it now today. So if you live in your home and you bought a second home, you didn't say whether you're moving into it, it's an investment, it is truly a second home in a vacation area. If you're still living in your primary home, nothing prevents you from doing cash out. Buying that second home, even if you moved into it, nothing prevents you from doing cash out on your first home. It just would be an investment property if you vacated to rent it out. So those are the details we would need to know, but in real terms, there's nothing that's preventing you from putting a new loan and getting cash out on the first home.
There you go. All right. Let's see here. So Michael's asking about price per square foot. We also have a Bay Area question. Obviously, we're not in the Bay Area. Talked about the Bay Area many, many times. You got a lot of tech money. You got a lot of money in general. Supply is an issue up there. You can't build more properties in the Bay Area for the most part. So you got people moving to Oakland, you got people moving to Sacramento, you got people moving on the outskirts of San Francisco because of affordability issues. I don't see much changing in that environment either. I mean, it's going to become a problem. And as more people start to come back to the city, because, initially when the virus, the pandemic hit, people wanted to get out of the densely populated areas. They wanted to go to the suburbs and have more land and all of that. And you're going to have people that continue to want to do that. But you're also going to have people that miss the city, want to be in the city, or maybe they get called back on jobs and have to be in the city for work purposes or whatever. At some point, this is going to be a memory with regards to the pandemic. It's not going to be something that we have to deal with forever. And people have short memories, y'all. So it's, it's going to continue to be a popular market, in my opinion. I don't live in San Francisco, but I know that, it comes up every week. Everybody's asking questions about the Bay Area. So I don't think much is going to change because there seems to be a lot of people wanting to be there. So that means demand is still high. So if you saw any pullback in prices at all, you'd have a lot of people jump in that market. So keep that in mind. Victor is asking about conventional loans. Are you seeing 14% increase? Could they do that with regards to loan limits, Josh?
I think the number he's reaching at is, like I said, a couple of lenders this week jumped in and said 625 for next year's loan limit, and that's a safe number. So we're at 548, 250. So if we say, look at it, that is exactly 14%. So they're predicting and guessing, and that's actually a safe number. They wouldn't be closing loans at 625 for next year. So just so you know, it's based off the FHFA Home Price Index at the end of October. It's announced in November. They go into effect for January 1, but lenders usually start doing them at those rates in December of this year. So PennyMac Wholesale and United Wholesale both this last week said, we'll do 625. And the reason for that is they know it's going to be a minimum of a 14% increase. So 625 is very safe for them to do that. It's more likely to be 15, 16, 17% increase. In most areas, this won't have a huge impact on what happens with home values. But we talked about this the last couple of weeks with that change coming, and we know it's coming. We are likely to see in those border areas, Riverside, San Bernardino, that we just talked about a little bit ago, when they have another $60,000 of borrowing power, it's going to open up. It's going to open up 3% and 5% and 3.5% down loans to people who've been wanting to get in. So you're going to have more. We've talked about before the difference between willing and able demand. Jeb and I are willing to buy a house on the beach in Malibu, but not able. Well, there's people willing to buy $600,000 houses in Riverside, San Bernardino County and not able to because they only have 3% down. As soon as they now have that ability because the loan limit's increased, there's more demand in that market for the same amount of supply. So we should see a small increase to home values. I don't know if it's going to cause them to go to the moon. They've already been going up pretty rapidly.
No, agreed. It's nuts. You're going to see a pop for sure.
Are you going to get Michael's hopes up like that by saying you're going to answer his question and then go into the Bay Area question?
What did I do?
You didn't answer his question.
I didn't. Oh, my bad, bro.
Despite the fact that he has bad taste in shirts, I want him to get his question answered.
And sports teams. What is the price per square foot in California for a home? About 132 plus per square foot in Texas. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, Josh. Do you know what the average is in California?
No,
I mean, here in Huntington Beach, it can range anywhere from about 400 to 500 up over 1,000, depending on. I mean, in Newport Beach, you got some of these homes $2,000-$3,000 a square foot. I mean, it gets incredible, but I don't know what the average number is. I don't know where they post that. So
yeah, no, 100%. We know Huntington Beach, but other areas in Orange County are cheaper. LA has some more expensive and cheaper areas. North of 500, it would be very hard to find a home for less than 500 a foot. And again, you guys are going, well, wow, what's magical about Southern California or California real estate? It's the land value. The value of the structure is pretty much the same anywhere. It costs the same to build it in Texas as it costs to build it here. It's just the scarcity of the land and the land values.
Yeah, I was looking at a report here that we get, just seeing if it shows the price per square foot. It does not. So Orange County, we can talk about average price. We could talk about, price to list ratio, all that good stuff, inventory, all that good stuff. But we don't have anything on here with price per square foot. So sorry, I can't answer that one for you at the moment. But I'll see if I can find something for you. JD Wrestler's got a comment here that I see these happen often too, and it's somewhat, it's hard to figure out what happens in these scenarios. So house on the market for $800,000 in July, 60 plus days, had 150 price drop to 650, and then goes into contract for 845. So it's hard to say, right? I mean, maybe they made some improvements to the property. Who knows? Like it's hard to say why a property doesn't goes off the market, then goes right back in for higher than it was listed initially. I've had these scenarios personally, not with these big of price drops. I mean, not those numbers, because that's a substantial price drop there. I mean, what's that? 15% or something, and then goes up above the original price. So it's hard to say without actually knowing the property and the area and all that good stuff, but it does happen. So just because a property reduces in price doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to actually get their price. And a lot of them, again, we've talked about this. When you see price reductions, understand where that reduction or that improvement, or however you want to classify that, is actually coming from. Is it coming from a property that is accurately priced, or is it coming from a property that is way overpriced? Because if it's way overpriced, who cares if they reduce the price? That changes nothing with regards to the direction of the market. Now, when you start to see properties that you think are undervalued because of where things have been in the past, then, and they're not getting offers, then be concerned, or then start to think that the market's shifting. But we're not seeing that at the moment in any of the situations that I've been a part of. So that is that. Let's see here. How do you feel about Bakersfield and Fresno? Josh, how do we feel about Bakersfield?
We want to become Bakersfield land barons, and I don't think Fresno would be all that different.
Listen, we just put a viewer. I referred a viewer to an agent that I know up in Fresno. She just put her in contract yesterday. You can buy a nice single family home in that market still for $350,000, which seems crazy, but you can do it. And in
Well,
Bakersfield, we were looking at one, it was like 200,000.
and I talked to someone from the show yesterday in Bakersfield. They
They
rent
want
the
to sell?
house they want to buy, and the house that they rent, $225,000. And I pulled
Listen,
it up. It's a small house. It's 1,100 square feet, but it's a cute little house. So,
listen, if you live in Bakersfield and you're looking to
and you
sell
want to
your home,
sell,
contact Josh and I first. We are your buyers. We're your buyer.
but we
Yeah.
don't want, if you have the most beautiful mansion in Bakersfield, we don't want that. We want
We don't, yeah, we don't want the, we don't
bread
want
and
the,
butter 3 and 2s.
yep, exactly. That 2 to 250 price point. We're looking for them. But yeah, great I mean, still a great opportunity to buy in those markets for prices that are reasonable, for cheaper than you can rent them for in many cases, right? You can actually buy a property and pay less on your mortgage in those markets than you could probably rent in those markets. So to me, that's still a good opportunity to purchase.
The rent for the girl in Bakersfield, it was almost identical to own it versus rent it. So why do you
Yeah.
want to pay someone else's? And if she owns $350 of that goes towards principal every month. So you're saving $4,000 a year in your home equity in addition to your appreciation. But honestly, we're not kidding. We do want to buy houses in Bakersfield. And the reason why is people always ask, I mean, how often do you get this, Jeb? Like, what's a normal human being supposed to do? Someone that makes $70,000 a year, I want to buy a home. I'm priced out of LA. Bakersfield's not that far away. Bakersfield has great barbecue and lots of good country music. So from that perspective, you're less than 2 hours away from LA if you need to be in LA regularly, and you can buy a real home for $250,000 and a very nice home for $450,000. So when you look at all of your options, not a bad option. And Fresno's not all that different. Fresno a little further north, a little higher price point, but still a normal person with a real job, not making $200,000 a year, can afford to buy. So those areas are going to continue to do well. One thing you want to look at, back in the bust 2004, 2005, 2006, they were building in the Central Valley like crazy, from Bakersfield, Fresno, Visalia, Tulare. All of that got overbuilt. We have not had any of that. So they had a really big bust there because so many homes got built. That's all been absorbed by population growth over the last 10 years, and they haven't been building like crazy like they did in the Central Valley. So I think the values will continue to do well there.
Awesome. Good explanation. Gracio has a question, also a longtime viewer here, asking, when buying up or down points, how do they determine the dollar amount? Is it a standardized dollar amount for every lender, Josh?
Not at all. Every lender puts out a rate sheet, and in general, you have the rule of thumb that a quarter of a point will get you a 0.25% in interest rate. So that's the easy answer. And going the other direction, going up a 0.25% in rate will get you a point of lender credit. So those are not hard and fast, and they're never exactly 1 point gets you a quarter cost or a quarter rebate, a quarter movement either way. So you always have to look at it in terms of the rate sheet. I had one today that to get down a 0.25% for the borrower was 0.82%. So the easy button on that, Graciel, is pick a lender that you know, like, and trust, and they can go through these and give you examples of it every day. So maybe we're going to mute Mr. Jeb here since he's talking so loud on his conversation. But yeah, that's the general rule. But the further you get away from par, which is the rate at 0 points, where you don't have to pay points and you don't get a lender credit, the further you get away from that, the less benefit you're going to get. So it may be 2.25 points to go down 0.5%, but it changes every day. No standard on that. So just check with the lender that you're working with, and they can go through those numbers and show you on a day-to-day basis what it looks like.
Got it. All right. So if everything goes out here, the electrician is in here working on light, so he has to cut off a circuit. He said it won't affect us, so we'll find out here soon enough, guys. Awesome. Thanks for hanging in there. Let's see what we got. Let's see. I'm Thirsty says, hi, Jeb. Want to move to East Valley in Arizona. There isn't much inventory, but North Phoenix has more cheaper homes available, yet I don't want to live up there. Should I wait? Here's the deal. If you don't want to live somewhere, don't sacrifice, in my opinion, right? Don't live somewhere you don't want to live just to buy a house. I mean, it seems, I don't know. I mean, everybody wants to get into the housing market, but I don't think you should sacrifice. You should have your non-negotiables. And if location is one of them, then stick to it and wait for more inventory to increase. At some point it will. The question is, to come is what happens once it increases, right? Do you see are prices still, much higher than they are now? Do they level out? It's hard to say. I mean, the one thing that the Phoenix area has is really good statistics for what's happening in the housing market. In fact, I received the Cromford report, which is something they do there. One of my buddies is an agent there, and he sends it to me. I don't know if it comes out every week or every month or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, but I get it. And there's always an analysis breakdown and what have you. And what I read this week was that there are pockets of inventory increasing in part of Phoenix area, the metro area, but it's not every area, right? Some areas still have inventory issues and so on and so forth. So depending on where you're looking, you might have to wait a little bit before that inventory picks up. But I think it's one of those things that you've got to figure out what's right for you. But I wouldn't move to an area I didn't want to be. It was pretty clear in there that you don't want to be there just to buy a house.
Jeb, you have a great example of this. You sold a client a home last year. They thought they were okay going to a slightly lower priced area and pretty rapidly figured out they didn't like it. Why don't you tell us how that worked out?
Are we talking about Fountain Valley? Which one are we talking about?
Well, didn't you had that client that moved out of the area and was already selling because they wanted to get somewhere cheaper. But the Fountain Valley one, yeah, same thing.
Well, it's hard. There's multiple situations. I've got a lot of stories, right, from either clients I know personally and or friends in the business or just friends in general that have moved out of state. But I had clients last year that purchased in December of last year. I think they closed, or maybe it was November, December of last year. And in Fountain Valley, not a bad area by any means. But they ended up in Fountain Valley because they didn't want to spend a little bit more money and be in Huntington at that time. Well, they realized that based on work and commutes and getting the kid to the grandparents and back home and all of this stuff, that it was, even though it's not that far, we're talking 10 minutes here, guys. Further, but they had to do this whole triangle thing and they didn't like it. And and therefore they ended up selling their property just a couple of months ago. Unfortunately, the market had appreciated like it did. So they got a lot more money for it and ended up spending more money and buying here in Huntington. It's one of those situations about, not sacrificing on where you want to be, because at the end of the day, you're going to regret it every single day you drive home. That's one of the things that I try to get into people's heads is you don't sacrifice on location, even if you might have to change your search criteria just a bit with regards to the type of property. Coming home every day is something you need to enjoy or at least want to do. Otherwise, it creates a set of issues in its own. All right, so we got a lot of people saying ones and twos here. So ones were the answer. Ones were the winner. So we're going with one for all of you that had no idea what I was talking about. We gave you guys the choice to choose, and you chose one of how you like the setup here. Live at 9 has a really, really solid point here. The ghettos have the best women. It's pretty simple. It's that's
or
she. I don't know.
That's subjective. We got it. It really. Because it's not.
But if they do, that's a reason
the same.
That's a reason to go there. Let's see. I'm looking for questions, Josh. If you see something, put it up there.
So we actually have a follow-up. So Jennifer popped up and said she has no credit score. So this is an important one. What does it mean when you have no credit score? There are loans that in theory allow this. In the real world, very few investors will buy them. And if they do make the loan or purchase the loan, they're going to charge a massive premium for that. If they don't have a score to measure you by, they're going to assume the worst. So assuming the worst, they're going to assume that it's a 500 credit score. It is really, really important to build credit. And there are methods in a relatively short period of time to get a credit score. So I'm going to go back, Jennifer, and give you my answer the first time. Email me, call me, and let's get on a call and talk about that, because you do not want to attempt to buy a home without a credit score. And since you're still in that process and still thinking about it, there's some things we can do to get you a credit score in a fairly short timeline.
All right, you're going to add her to you're going to authorize user to your credit card, Josh?
Authorized user works, and the fastest and easiest way to it. If you know no one who can add you to their account, or you would be willing to be added as an authorized user, is secured credit cards. And there's a couple of companies. They're not the best secured credit cards. They're the best secured credit cards for rapidly building credit. They
Listen,
report every week instead of a monthly reporting cycle, so that you can build that score more quickly.
I get about one solicitation per week for me to do a sponsored ad in my videos with one of those companies. Like, there's so many of them, and they all want me to pitch their secured credit card or debit card or whatever. So guys, I'm not going down that road. I'm not going to sell out to a secured credit card, just so we're clear.
But here, listen, does anyone want a secured credit card? No one wants a secured credit card, but they are a tool and they can get you where you want to go. So if you have no credit, you're a 30-year-old adult and you've never built credit up to that point, you may have to start with a secured card. And if you're doing it and you're trying to do it in a short time frame, the most important criteria about that secured card is not the terms, not how solid the bank is, it's how quickly they report to the bureaus. So a couple of these will report within the first week. You get it, you go down, buy a Dr. Pepper or a beer on an 805 on your card, it's going to show up within a week, and it's going to show that you're using credit. So
that's fantastic.
Again, there's a time and a place for those tools. Now, Jeb, this question could take the better part of the rest of the show to answer. SNN Media Production Zoll Photography says, is there an opportunity cost for renting over buying? We have been able to save about $250,000, paid off our student loan while living in an apartment for the last 6 years. So anytime someone runs the numbers, an engineer with a spreadsheet can show you that you can come out over time renting and investing the difference. It doesn't happen very often in the real world because most people don't have the discipline. You've answered the second question. You have had the discipline in 6 years to save $250,000. That's $40,000 a year of savings. You paid off a student loan. You've been living at a slightly lower cost, but we don't know where you're at. But let's say that 6 years ago was 2015. You bought a $500,000 house here in Orange County. What's the price on that home now, Jeb? $800,000? Easily. And you would have paid that mortgage down over that time. You know, a $500,000 loan, you're going to pay it down $7,000 or $8,000 a year. In 6 years, you'd have $50,000 of principal pay down. You'd have $300,000 of appreciation. So yeah, there's an opportunity cost. So you've shown that you can do it both ways. The reason why the owner comes out ahead is because of leveraged appreciation. Let's say you had $20,000 when you bought that $500,000 house and you put 3% down. You've got $300,000 of gains on a $20,000 investment. If we looked at over the 6 years, saving $40,000 a year, even if you got an 8% return on that money, which it's been a good stock market. So if you had it fully invested and we're getting an 8% return, the return on owning that home vastly exceeded what you would have got in the market. And then the second piece of that, or a second or third piece of that, is you fixed your housing cost. So you got a 30-year fixed. In 2015, rates were good, not quite as good as they got during the pandemic. You could have gotten a lower interest rate, lowered that fixed payment, while rents have been going up as quickly as home prices. So if you are a disciplined person capable of saving and investing successfully, the mathematics tell you can come out ahead saving and investing. In the real world, it just doesn't happen.
No, great example. I mean, that's solid breakdown there. So good stuff, Josh. Let's see here. Grown up gaming. Zillow estimates 452,000 and 287,000 forbearance exits in September and October. Aren't these going to cause a slight dip in home prices in October in Orange County, San Diego, SoCal? No, because that 452 and that 287, who knows where those are, right?
How are they going to exit? Not only how are they going to exit?
Good point. And where are those dispersed, right? That's 452,000. Let's just add them up, right? So that's 739,000, right? If I did the math correct, 739,000 exits over the next 2 months. How many of those are in SoCal? Okay. Maybe a large percentage of them, but how many of them are able to work with their lender on an exit that is beneficial to the person exiting, right? Maybe their payment gets lowered, maybe their interest rate goes down, maybe they take a portion of the initial mortgage along with the partial claim, throw it to a second and lower. I mean, there's a lot of different options here to keep that homeowner in the home. So the idea here is that you're not really going to see the foreclosures from it, but you'll get some people that just say, you know what, I want to sell. I can't do this anymore. I'm stressed out, whatever. So maybe you get some properties. I just don't think it's going to be, it's not going to trickle to the market any more than a normal seasonal, just every day, in my opinion. I just, it's too spread out, right? This isn't a localized thing. I mean, maybe none of them are in Orange County. I mean, that's nearly impossible, but you got to think, I mean, it's going to be spread out everywhere. So,
the best analysis I've seen, Jeb, is that worst case scenario is 15 to 20% of those exits result in a forced sale. They're not foreclosures. They're not short sales, because the home values have gone up faster than their loan balance has gone up in the last 18 months, not making the payment. The appreciation exceeded the forbearance payments that were not made that will be added to the balance. So it's not going to be a short sale. It's not going to be a foreclosure. 15 to 20% worst case would become a forced sale. So
that's 147,000, 148,000
in the United States.
In the United States, correct.
So break it down. Let's say 40,000 of them are in California. 25% of those, say 50,000 of them are in California. That's our worst case scenario, and we're allocating more of them to California than we think would actually be there. That doesn't bring it to a balanced market. You add that inventory in. That doesn't bring enough supply to market to offset the demand that is out there that exceeds the current supply of homes. So at 2,000% will not result in a dip in prices. It could result in a decrease in the rate of appreciation because there are more homes for the buyers in the market to choose from. So they wouldn't get into such bidding wars, push prices up as rapidly, but there's no world in which it results in a dip in prices.
All right. I like it. No, that's, I mean, good analysis. Let's see here. I'm Thirsty has another question here. Currently trying to convince a seller to let me use my conventional loan on their cash only townhome. Question is, why would it be a cash only townhome? I have 20% down, but they are trying to increase the amount of interest charged. Why?
Who?
Yeah, so maybe they own the townhome free and clear. You're looking to put 20% down and have them finance the rest. Is that what I'm getting? I need more.
Your thought is very viable, but I think what the situation is here, it's a non-warrantable condo / townhome. There's something wrong. Either the condition of the property is so awful it doesn't qualify for financing. More likely, there's an issue with the complex that it doesn't qualify for conventional or FHA financing because of most likely the financials of the complex.
Yes. Okay, makes sense.
So with that being an issue, there are lenders that will do non-warrantable condos. They will charge a higher rate of interest. So if that's is your lender saying, yeah, we can do that, the seller should be able to understand that, yes, you can't use traditional Fannie Freddie FHA financing on this, but we can go to a lender that's okay with a non-warrantable condo with my 20% down and willingness to accept a slightly higher interest rate. Just be really careful and be aware of what you're getting into. Like, Jeb, if you had a client considering buying a non-warrantable condo, how would you advise them?
Not to buy it.
Okay. Just no. The answer is absolutely no.
Yeah, I mean, not always. I mean, I remember back in the day doing loans and that sort of thing. There were unwarrantable condos out there, and there was financing happening on them and what have you. I mean, I guess it depends on the issue of why it's not warrantable, right? I mean, you gotta is it something that can be resolved? But most of the time, if there's something going on like that, you got to get to the bottom of it, right? And figure out clearly what's going on. Otherwise, I tell most buyers not to get involved, because unless you're comfortable with the potential unknown of what happens there. And if it stays unwarrantable, again, you got potential resale issues, right? Less buyers are going to want it. Less qualified buyers are actually going to be able to get financing, that sort of thing.
And the reason why these are generally desirable, why someone is going, no, I really want to convince this seller to take my offer on this property, even though there's a non-warrantability issue, is they're cheaper. They're cheaper because you have to sell them at a discount because most people want or need conventional financing. So we were reading between the lines a little bit on that one, and reading between the lines a little bit more, saying, I'm currently trying to convince a seller. Sounds like they might be negotiating directly with the seller. If you were considering a non-warrantable condo, unless you have a considerable amount of experience in real estate, I would definitely recommend making sure you have a professional realtor that has dealt with this situation, or at least condos and association documents, and can dig into the details better for you. Because your hope would be that by the time you would sell later on down the line, that it meets Fannie Freddie guidelines, and that a potential buyer, when you become the seller, could get financing for that property and get you a top dollar price or whatever that may be at that time.
All right, good stuff. Michael DeRee has a question here. Can a new build appreciate even if it's not built yet? Absolutely, absolutely. You're seeing it happen all over the place at the moment. If you're in a first phase of a development, and you bought a property that's on the list, and they have 2, 3, 4 phases out. I mean, maybe you even bought in the second phase. Chances are your property is going to be worth more when it's actually built than when you sign that contract, just because of them building out those other phases. So absolutely.
Jeb, we just answered that question from Gracielle on Paying Points, but Gracielle is under contract on a new build, and she's thinking it's gone up close to 20% since they got
That's
it
right.
under contract. So in that instance, they're walking in the door with equity. And this is, some of the other questions that we got. Hey, I'm under contract, and the seller on the new build is telling me that the price is higher. If they write their contracts right, they can insulate themselves from some of that appreciation loss while the property is being built. But obviously not all of them are, because Gracielle is going to be walking into equity when they close in December.
No, good stuff. Let's see here. Okay, so Ted saying, my loan officer said I cannot purchase a second home with 5% down until I have a lease contract for my current home. Is this correct? Do I have any options? So it looks like they're looking to buy not a second home, but a new, maybe primary residence for a home, and they're going to lease out your current residence. Am I understanding that right, Josh?
That, I think from what we have there, you're correct. And that is not true under the guidelines. I suppose it could possibly be true under a certain situation with your qualification. So unless there's something specific to you that we're not understanding, you do not have to have a lease contract for my current home. You can show what the market rents are. For a period of time after the downturn, lenders were requiring the lease agreement, but now we can get away with a market rent survey showing what the market rents are going to be. So you don't, on your typical Fannie Freddie deal, have to have the lease agreement ahead of time, but there was a period of time when you did.
All right. So I got 2 questions from Ricardo asking about SB 10 here in the state of California. The first one, how can I purchase a foreclosure property through SB 10? I maybe have a misinterpretation of what SB 10 is.
Hold on that one, Jeb. I think one of the litany of things they had in there is the first look for owner occupants. So foreclosed properties can't be sold to investors until that first look period. And I think that's what he's asking about.
Well, SB 10 has nothing to do with that. So SB 10 essentially allows you to, or builders, cities, to bypass the environmental review and build up to 10 units on a single family zoned lot. So it doesn't really have anything to do with buying pre-existing homes out there. SB 10 is essentially what Newsom passed to kind of speed up the process to be able to build some of these multifamily properties that are, less expensive to build. So I don't, the two don't tie into each other unless I'm completely missing something there. And that goes on to explain what SB 10 is, right? It allows a city to bypass environmental review to build as many as 10 units on a single family parcel. Is what SB 10 is. SB 9 is more of what homeowners and or people buying property are going to benefit from. I'm actually doing a video. I've already done the video, and it's going to hit tomorrow. So if you're in California and want to know about SB 9, SB 10, even SB 8, I talk about all 3 of those in the video that's published tomorrow. So check that out. All right. Let's see here. So Josh, let's see. How about using a HELOC instead of credit cards? So you can't, do you want to address that, Josh? A HELOC instead of credit cards?
So some HELOCs will give you a debit card with it, and you can charge on the home. And the benefit there would be your credit card interest would be tax deductible. In some situations, you would want to talk to your tax advisor. You can take out up to $100,000 of what's considered equity indebtedness after purchasing your home and deduct it, but you'd want to make sure it's deductible in your situation. So you would want to specifically find out from the HELOC lender, do I have debit card access to it or just checks? And then talk to your tax advisor and find out if it would be deductible. Otherwise, I'm not sure I would see the benefit. You'd be better off with a mileage card or an Amazon rebate card, any of the millions of websites and YouTube channels that will tell you how to game the credit card system.
All right, there you go. Let's go up. Just trying to find some good questions.
I really just want to make a comment on this one, Jeb.
Yep.
We go through a version of a question. I bought for cash 250,000, sold 2 years after for 380,000, and can't find anything. It's insane. It is a crazy market out there. So we always ask the question. People ask, should I sell? Sell and do what? The danger in the current market is it's hard to get something under contract. So if Idalia's plan was to sell and find something new, the way to protect yourself is to get yours under contract contingent upon you finding another replacement property. If you don't, you can find a gap here. In some of these areas in the last 6 months, we've seen 10% increases. Could be a $30,000, $40,000 mistake not covering yourself in that way. So if you're thinking about selling and you want to get back into the market, make sure you talk to a professional and go through the ways of covering yourself when you make that decision.
All right, good stuff. Let's see here. Jennifer Beeston showed up, says 100% Bakersfield is going up. So I know she's in the process of looking for investment property because she's doing a 1031 tax exchange. And she said she's having a hell of a time trying to find property in this market.
Jennifer, so, we have already claimed any potential sales.
Bakersfield is ours.
In Bakersfield.
You stay out of there.
Stay out. Go wherever you want. Any of the Sacramento-ish area, you go right ahead.
Yeah, we've claimed put our flag down in Bakersfield. All right, here I'm just reading through some comments, guys. Hang in there with me. So I had so we got a question here. So Alberto says, in the process of building a new townhome, and our original closing date was October 1st and is now December 15th. Considering the latest news from the Fed, should they lock in their loan now, Josh, or wait? So you're talking about a 40, 65 day, 70-day lock at this point, probably 75 days or so, based on that. So cost to lock being that far out, obviously going to be exponentially higher than locking a 30-day loan. Just talk about rates a bit. Let's see what
we've seen. We talked a little bit earlier in the show. Rates are up 1/8 to 1/4% just in the last week. And when we look at the technicals and look at the charts, we're always looking for, where is our support? Where is the end of this increase in interest rates? And we haven't really seen it yet. I have 4 high-cost subscriptions of experts that follow this stuff. None of them agree 100%, but they all seem to agree that we haven't put in a bottom. So rates could get worse from here before we see the end of it. So this is like the worst of all possible worlds, not being able to close on your refinance or your purchase until December 15th. And with builders, a high probability it gets pushed back even further than that. What happens is anything longer than a 60-day lock gets, did we lose? We don't have lights, Jeb. Oh, it was just the light there. I thought him cutting the lights. I thought he killed them. We weren't getting them back. Anything longer than a 60-day lock starts getting prohibitively expensive, and 90 days plus, you're likely to have to pay a fee up front to even do the lock. So my worry here is relative to a 30-day lock, you're paying about 1/8% or slightly more than that premium to lock for 75 days. So we've already seen 1/8 to 1/4 pop in the last week. You're volunteering to pay 1/8 more, a minimum on top of that, to ensure that it doesn't go up even worse. Now, in the short run, I think rates could get worse. And I don't know if we see the end of the worsening of rates in October, in November, and where exactly they hit. So it really comes down to your risk tolerance level and the exact cost of that 75-day lock. It's something worth considering, talk to your lender and also find out what their options. Lenders that specialize in new construction, lenders that work with the builders. If you're working with the builders lender, they know this can come up. So some of them offer a float down option, lock to cover yourself in your worst case scenario. And if rates are better, you have an option to recover some of what you potentially gave up in that process. So absolutely talk to your lender and see what the options are. So any of the rest of you out there, if you are in escrow and you got an offer accepted this week, lock your loan. We don't know what comes next. Do I think rates are going to spike up? Do I think we're going to go another quarter higher from here? No, I don't. But there's a potential for that. And if you're in a 30-day escrow, there's no sense adding additional stress and making you want to wake up every morning and see, what did the 10-year bond do yesterday? Or what's it doing at the market open this morning? There's enough stress in a transaction with inspections, appraisals, all your contingency periods. Take that off the table and lock. It's situations like this, if you have a 60-day escrow or a home that's going to be finished being built in 75 days, that you may want to consider not locking. But any of the shorter time frames, there's too much uncertainty. Again, I pay for people that are really smart and have followed this for 20, 30, 40 years. None of them have any clarity of saying, hey, we've seen the end of the increases in interest rates. I would like to think that it is, and we put in a bottom here and we carve back some of the losses, but we don't have any guarantees with that. And if you're thinking of refinancing and you are waiting, holding off, you wanted them to go even lower, get with a lender. And if it makes sense, if the numbers are there, just lock it in. You know, Jeb and I talk about this all the time. Do the loan at 0 points, no cost if possible. That way, if 12 months from now, 24 months from now, 6 months from now, rates are lower, you don't have sunk costs in paying for that loan, and you can take advantage of a move lower. Because I still believe that the longer term trend is lower for interest rates. And I'm not going out on a limb on that. Rates have been decreasing since 1982. What's most likely to happen? A change in a 40-year trend or a continuation of more of the same after we see short-term movement. So a 40-year trend doesn't mean that for 40 years rates have only gone down. It means that year over year, they continually go down. You have periods where they go up and come down, and right now we're in a shorter term time frame that I think is probably a 2-3 month run of higher interest rates before we resume the decrease. But if you're in a shorter time frame, or if you're looking at taking advantage of lower interest rates, do it now, just because we don't have any certainty of what happens going forward.
No, good stuff. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. Basically, I'm going to sum it up in that you should lock your loan. If the payment makes sense to you, lock your loan. Once you lock it, stop looking at rates and move on. Hi, y'all is asking a question. How does a 1031 work exactly? So a 1031 allows you to basically, what is the proper verbiage here? It allows you to avoid paying capital gains taxes on the sale of an investment property. So when you have an investment property and you've gained equity in that property, you go to sell it, you're going to be taxed on that equity of that property. And so what a 1031 allows you to do is take that equity that you've gained, transfer it into another investment property of like kind. It has to go up in value from the one that you're selling. And it can be multiple properties and so on and so forth. But the idea here is you're going from one property to another property of higher value, same type of property. What I mean by that is you're going from residential to residential or residential to some sort of commercial type property. You're not going from, selling a house to, buying a business, so to speak. I don't think you can do a 1031 in that regard. So transferring your taxes, you have 45 days to identify properties and 180 days to close on them. So you have to identify up to 3 properties, Josh? I don't remember exactly the number. And then you have 180 days, I believe, to close on those properties, something that you've identified after that period, right? Did I miss anything there? Yep. I don't know. Anyway, so it's basically, I wouldn't say it's a loophole in the tax code, but it allows you to essentially not have to pay taxes on your gains and keep them rolling into bigger properties, essentially creating more wealth. It's kind of a Donald Trump-ish thing, right? I mean, everybody gets mad about the way he did his taxes and buying real estate and transferring it into other pieces of property and buying bigger and better and all of that good stuff. Take the politics aside, it's basically following the tax code there. And for a long time, they've been trying to tax the 1031 in different ways and not allow 1031s and so on and so forth. So who knows? I know at some point there was something on the table about trying to get rid of 1031s, but there's a lot of wealthy money behind that whole thing. So I don't know if you'll ever get rid of it. Anyway, that's enough. Josh, anyway, isn't there another way to escape? Well, let's see here. Did I miss a part of that question? PMI payment without a refinance. So is there another way to escape PMI without refinancing? If I want to get rid of PMI on my loan, I have 20% equity. Is it just going to fall off, or do I need 22% equity, or whatever the number is?
So we actually have a couple of questions here that are all in the same range. So let's throw this up here. Michael DeRee starts with FHA. Does PMI ever fall off, or do I have to refinance?
Do you not watch my videos, Michael?
He's got a video on this.
Come on, man.
Minimum down FHA, it's on there for the life of the loan. So you're never going to get rid of it. So the other question that we're talking about here, can you get out of it? Here we've got just multiple versions of the thing with Rick Carrington. Can you get out of PMI with a conventional loan? I don't have 20% paid off my loan, but I have more than 20% equity. So on Fannie Freddie conventional loans, you can get rid of the mortgage insurance. The mortgage insurance will go away by guideline when you reach 78% of your original loan value. So you're going to pay it down over time. That takes a long time, generally more than 10 years. So most of you are asking, hey, I've had it for a year, 2 years. The way the mortgage insurance is written, the lender can require you to have mortgage insurance on your home for 2 years to evidence a satisfactory payment history. After 2 years, you will not have paid it down enough on a 5 or a 10% down that you would have 20% or more equity. But with appreciation, you certainly could. So in that instance, you do not have to refinance, which was the original question. You can go back to the lender and say, hey, I've made my payments on time for 24 months or more. My home value's gone up. I've paid it down. What is the process for removing my mortgage insurance? They're going to tell you, here's an application. As part of the application process, you have to have an appraisal to prove to us that the home value has gone up, and they can get rid of it. So we haven't seen much of this in the last 7, 8, 10 years, because since 2013, the Fed's been manipulating interest rates lower. So there's been refinance opportunity after refinance opportunity. It's always easier once the value's gone up. If you're already going to have to do an appraisal, just do a refi, get a lower rate, and get rid of the mortgage insurance. So FHA is going to be on there for the life of the loan. Conventional, you can get rid of it with a refinance. You do not have to do a refinance. You can also petition your lender if you've made on-time payments for the last 2 years and can get an appraisal showing them that you have more than 20% equity in the home.
All right. So there you go. Hopefully that made sense to everyone out there. We're 264 people watching at the moment. If you haven't done so, do us a favor, hit that little thumb button at the bottom. Helps more people see it. More people get educated. More people have a better home buying, home selling experience. And, Josh and I aren't wasting our time here. So, appreciate it if you hit that. It helps more people see it, like I said. So let's move on. I hate asking for that, guys. I really do. If you guys just hit it when you came in, I wouldn't have to ask. Sorry, I'm going to back off now.
Al Bundy's trying to trigger me.
He is. What is he saying? He call you something? He talk about your shirt?
When does it make sense to buy down your interest rate? Jeb just answered the question. The question is virtually never. I had a situation this week where it actually may make sense. The reason for it was senior citizen retired couple, husband is in poor health. After he passes, there will not be enough documentable income to refinance again. So they were sitting there saying, what if we pay 2 points on this? It would get them about 0.5% lower in the interest rate, lock in a very low payment for her over the life of the loan. That was about the only time that it makes sense. Now, why do we say it doesn't make sense? Because the time to recoup, when we say the rule of thumb is 1 point will get you 0.25% reduction in interest rate, that takes about 5 years to recoup. Plus or minus on any given day, loan size, it's going to tell you about 5 years to recoup that benefit. We just talked about for the last 40 years, we've been in a decreasing interest rate market. Why would we pay a point today that it takes 5 years to recoup when we're going to get an opportunity most likely in the next 5 years to get that interest rate for free? That's why we always counsel our clients, other things being equal, to do 0 points and keep the money in their pocket to take advantage when rates lower over time. Now, again, when could a situation make sense? Someone does not make enough money to qualify at the 0 point interest rate, and if they pay a point or two, they buy the interest rate down, our debt to income ratio comes in line. So there are exceptions, but they are very rare exceptions. Take the 0 point interest rate, preserve your ability to benefit when rates decrease in the future, which they absolutely will.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, when I say never, if you absolutely are set on keeping your same loan for the duration of that loan term and you are not going to refinance regardless of what happens in the world, then maybe it makes sense to refinance. Other than that, it makes absolutely no sense, like Josh said. So we're moving on. Cole says, let's talk about rent rates increasing due to home prices going up. What will happen to rent rates if the housing market prices plane out or go down slightly over the next 2 to 3 years? So Josh, I'm going to ask you a question. In your 40-something years of existence, clearly you haven't been following rents for that long, but how many times have you seen rents go down in a market?
It's very rare. You
Right.
saw flat to minimal, like in certain less desirable markets, you saw some minimal decreases in the collapse, but it doesn't really happen. They don't go down to any appreciable level.
And let's talk about inflation. Inflation comes into play. Things get more costly out there. So you're in an inflationary environment. Are rents going to typically go down in that type of environment, or are homeowners or landlords going to raise rents during those periods?
Well, the thing that I look on is in terms of inflation, in terms of rents, this is a supply and demand issue also. So like I would question the premise here. He's saying home prices have gone up, so rents are going up. Rents can only go up if there's people willing and able to pay it. So they're going up because there's a demand for housing, both owned housing and rented housing. So when we look at that, when is the supply and demand going to change? If home prices level off and the demand for rental properties decreases because prices have leveled and more people are deciding to buy, I could see that. But I mean, from my perspective, Jeb, tell me what your thoughts are on it. It comes back to supply and demand. Right now, there's not enough units to rent for those willing to rent it. So those that own them are able to increase the price that they're asking.
No, absolutely. The only way you see rents decrease, in my opinion, is if you see a change in the number of rentable houses in a market. Take house prices out of it, for example, right? In some markets, for example, you might have new construction, right? They're building a bunch of rent, properties for rent, like here in Orange County, right? The Irvine company is building a ton of new construction of buildings that are going to be rented property. And they're doing that because they see demand. They need to, I'm just going to start over. There's a lot of companies out there building properties right now for rentals because there's a lot of demand for those types of properties. So until you see, demand on those properties slow down and the number of units continue to rise, you're not really going to see any change in rents, right? And historically, rents continue to go up along with the prices of everything, right? You're going to pay more to rent a property now than you were 5 years ago, and again 5 years from that, and so on and so forth. So your $2,000 a month rent now, at some point in the future, it might not be next year, it might not be five, it's going to be $2,500 or maybe even $3,000, depending on the market that you're in, just because affordability becomes an issue. People aren't able to buy homes because of where prices have gone. And even if they pull back, you've still got, there's not enough supply on the market to really change anything. So I don't think you're going to see much change on that front. At the same time, clearly there seems to be a desire to own rentals because you've got, again, we've talked about this, hedge funds, these big conglomerates, if you will, buying tons of rental property because they see demand in that environment. And you're getting to a point where people are either selling their homes because they feel like there's a top in it and they're going to rent something for a while. You see people having to rent because they can't afford to purchase a property. And then you've got all of these millennials that are prime buying age or whatever. Maybe they're living at home and now it's time to move out. Right? They're not in a position to buy a home for whatever reason. They've got to rent something. So there's very strong demand for rentals. There always will be. So I don't think you're going to see much change on that front. I think rentals are are going to continue to rise, at least in desirable areas. Right now, if you're in the middle of the country and there's not a huge population or whatever, then you might see a change in that environment. But SoCal markets like that, it's I think the future is pointing up with regards to the direction of rent prices. Anyway, I could have probably said that in like a sentence, and I spent like 5 minutes on it. That sucked.
You can't edit live.
I know, this is terrible. All right, question. Dan Z says, can you use your 401k or 529 savings to cover closing costs, Josh? And then maybe even talk about down payment with that too. So let's talk about down payment and closing costs.
Well, both of those options don't differentiate between your down payment and your closing costs. What they're going to require you to do is go through an application process, provide a copy of your loan estimate that shows you're buying this home and this is how much you need. And they're not going to give you, with the 401k, you can get up to $50,000 in a loan against it. They're not going to give you a $50,000 loan if you need $30,000 for your down payment and closing costs. But let's say in this instance, you're specifically asking about closing costs. So you probably have your down payment. So you're saying, I've got my down, I just need a little bit to cover my closing costs. You can split it up however you want, as long as that loan estimate shows that you need the money to purchase the home. Nice.
Good stuff. And you guys really responded when I asked for the thumbs up. I mean, you guys came in like 40 thumbs strong. That was good. If that worked every time, I would just keep here hitting that button, asking you guys to do it. So let's see. Jay has a question that we've answered a couple times. Can I rent an FHA mortgage after 12 months? Do I need to fill out paperwork or just it's matured, I can rent it now?
So the FHA loan is no different than any other loan. They're not saying that you are prohibited from renting it out in the future, but as any other owner-occupied loan, you are signing an occupancy affidavit that says within 60 days of closing, you intend to occupy it as your primary residence. Let's say you did that. You move in 2 days after closing and it's your primary residence, and 60 days later, you find out your mother is sick and you got to go back to Pittsburgh to take care of her. You can rent that property out immediately. It was unforeseen. You didn't intend to buy it as a rental. And as far as that goes, there's no occupancy police either. No one's knocking on your door and saying, hey, Jay, are you still living in this house? No one is going to check. You know, there have been situations in the past where there was questions about occupancy, and as a condition of the loan, they said, hey, sometime in the first 90 days, we're going to do an occupancy check. But for the most part, it never happens. If it did come to your lender's attention and they tried to claim occupancy fraud, you would want to show what it was or why it happened, why you moved on. In this instance, if you wait 12 months and you want to move on somewhere else and rent the property out, you have no problems with that. Really, it comes down to just your conscience of saying, did I actually intend to occupy this property as my residence when I took out owner-occupied financing?
All right. AJ NL Fair has a couple of questions here. This was the second one, but I clicked on this one, asking about an overview of SB 9 and 10 and asking, will this help or not help the California housing market down the road? So I talk about these two initiatives, if you will, that are now law in a video that's going to post tomorrow. So you'll be able to get my thoughts on it. But at the end of the day, I don't think either of these benefit anyone but homeowners and or the builders and the people that are doing the work. I think there's very few gains for somebody that's actually a home buyer in this scenario. It just, I don't see how this really helps with the housing affordability in California. And that's primarily what it was there for. But again, my thoughts are it doesn't really do much to change that dynamic. And I think, you know, I read a stat from the UCLA. They did this analysis, and out of 7.5 million homes in California, that's the number that they say are here in California, only 400,000 of those homes actually qualify to be able to do what SB 9 allows you to do. And SB 9 essentially allows you to take a lot and split it into two different parcels. Okay, so SB 9 says if you have, say, a 6,000 square foot lot, that's pretty typical here in Huntington, Orange County, you could subdivide that lot into 3,000 square foot lots. One lot can't be 60%. Any larger than 60% larger than the other. So you could go 60-40, you could go 50-50, whatever. But out of those two lots, you could build two homes. And out of those two homes, each of those two homes can have an ADU. an auxiliary dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit, whatever you want to call it. So you could actually have up to 4 properties on one single family zoned lot, right? So they've done away with single family zoning by passing this. So you tell me who benefits in that scenario. I don't know how and when you go to do this, you've got to sign an affidavit saying that you're going to occupy the property for 3 years, right? And then there's certain restrictions on how big the properties have to be, and so on and so forth. But I get into it more in the video, my thoughts on it, but I don't know how this is going to benefit anyone. I think it benefits homeowners that have large lots, that have money to be able to either equity to pull out and build this sort of thing, or it benefits the person that owns a large lot and has the money, the cash on hand to be able to do this sort of thing. It benefits the contractors, the construction workers that are doing the work, that are building the ADUs and the other units and so on and so forth. But other than that, I don't see the benefit. But that's my thoughts. And I think it potentially ruins neighborhoods. Parking on the street. You've got a whole bunch of issues going. I mean, potential issues that could happen from this whole thing. So,
and Jeb, what neighborhoods are going to suffer the most? Is someone going to go to a $2 million neighborhood and throw an ADU in their backyard?
I mean, they might. They have the ability to do that. That's what's crazy.
They might, but where are
Right.
people going to think seriously about this? They're going to go, oh, I want to go to inner city Los Angeles, and I can get a home for $400,000 to fix the house up, put another unit in the backyard, and now I have a duplex. So there are some restrictions in there. Like you said, investors can't do that, but someone could say, I'm going to do that for 3 years, and now I have a nice little 2-unit rental, and I'll move to a higher end area. I just don't see it happening nearly as much in high end areas as in lesser areas, which often are older neighborhoods. So inner city Los Angeles, a lot of those were built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, narrower streets, smaller garages if they have them at all. It's just
then let's talk about those properties. Okay, so they build a duplex. Or another unit on that property. There's nothing to say how much they can charge for the rent on that property. There's nothing to say that rent has to be deemed affordable or geared towards lower income or anything, right? So now, they could charge, over market rent because now it's living in a nice neighborhood, whatever. So I don't see where the benefit is. Now I understand, going back in how single families were zoned and there was some discrimination and all of that. I understand the whole single family zoning thing going back in the day, but the reality is what they're doing here isn't changing what's already happened, and it's not going to do anything to address affordability. So that's my thoughts. That was a really long way of getting, and I don't even know what I even talked about in that video. So I might have said that. Anyway, your other question. We have a rental lease end at the end of March in San Diego. We're contemplating if we should step into the market before the end of the year or wait until after the new year. Any advice, pros, cons? This is one of those things, right? We have this question a lot. Should you buy now or should you wait? If you are absolutely certain that you're buying it next year, I would say I think you're going to benefit from buying now versus waiting to next year. The benefit, right? There might be some benefits to waiting. I think your prices are going to be higher, especially in San Diego, depending on where you're looking. Chances are it's going to be higher, maybe not significantly, but I don't think you're going to see lower prices. But I think what you will see is as March comes around, my guess is you're going to have probably increased buyers are going to be out, but you might have more property, right? You might have more inventory because I think as we move closer to the end of the year, I don't know that you're going to see a lot more properties come on the market, right? It means less options. Spring is typically the hotter time of the year to list properties, to sell property. And I think, if tradition holds, seasonality stands true, then you're going to see more of that next year. But I think you're going to end up paying more for that property than you would at the moment. So the pros would be, the cons would be that you potentially pay more, right? Maybe potentially higher rates. We don't know, right? We don't know what the cons are. And that's why I say, if you're looking at property now, the payment makes sense to you. You plan on being there for a longer period of time, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is, you got money in the bank. Who cares? Who cares what happens in 6 months? I mean, everybody right now is so focused on what happens the next day versus just getting into the market and getting into something they're comfortable with. Hindsight is a beautiful thing, right? Everybody that is looking right now thinking they should have purchased 6 months ago, and those people that purchased 6 months ago are thinking they should have purchased 6 months before that. And we can continue to do that for the last 10 years almost. And I don't think you're going to see much change on that front. Josh, any thoughts on Evergrande in China and its effect on the U.S.? This is something we haven't addressed. I talked about it on Christina's channel on Sunday, but what are your thoughts on that?
It sure could, but it's pretty unlikely. It's big. It's really, really big in China.
Right.
So in terms of if their government did let it fail, there would be losses in the United States, and that could limit or tighten credit. It's so far removed from our market that I don't think that it would, but it's above my pay grade. I follow a lot of stuff. From what I've seen, I don't really have much of a concern about it, but it could, sure could. You could give me a couple of scenarios under which it impacts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in Zai, what is the leader's name over there? Zai or Z or whatever his name is, has basically said that, they're not going to help them and allow it to fall or fail or what have you. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the whole thing with China, and I talked about is like their whole deal has been a facade for forever, right? The numbers that they report, the earnings that they report on companies. I mean, they got entire cities that are vacant and just continuing to, do what we're doing here in the U.S. Oh, wow. No, they've just been, it's a facade, right? So, I think their ego is too big. I mean, quite frankly, to allow something like that to take place, but we'll see, right? It's going to be interesting. They did say that any money that the company has, they're going to use to finish the projects and so on and so forth that they're working on. So it's hard to say what is actually going to happen and what is even true coming out of that whole situation. I mean, that's the real question is, the reporting and the numbers and everything that they report. It's sometimes it's hard to know if it's even accurate. So, but we will know momentarily, I guess. I mean, the more important question is when does the debt ceiling in the United States get extended? Because that is more of a concern than anything else. And let's be honest, it's going to get extended, but these idiots have to fight with each other for the next however many days before they do it.
Yeah, that's the case. Because if you remember back in 2012, 2013, 2014, this was an every year thing. Like you just got tired of like, really, we're going to go through this again. We know you're not going to let it happen. So why are you going to have a
standoff,
a finger measuring contest to see who can go the farthest with?
Why didn't you use the actual term?
Well, it's a kid friendly show.
No, we're not. We're deemed adults on. No, I'm just kidding. But don't do it. Yeah, don't say it. We're good. We're good.
So hold on, Jeb. So we're in the economics portion of the show, and we haven't had any charts yet this week. But Joel Schoenhofen says, when do the banks stop giving too many people too much money to continue buying all the overpriced homes that they realistically can't afford? So we have a lot of false premises to unpack here. Generally, when we get a question like this is someone who didn't buy when prices were lower, really wants prices to be lower, and is looking for reason why prices are artificially high and they're going to come back to a level that they would be comfortable buying in. So again, this is not to pick on Joel or to beat up on it, but the first thing here, let's jump in. We're going to share the old screen over here, get us a Chrome tab. So why?
And while he's doing that, Nightbot's still throwing out daggers out there.
Nightbot's mad at people?
Cindy Juggle Goddess is scared. Say that 3 times.
What'd she do that upset?
I don't know. I think all caps or something. I didn't terminate it. Stop spamming emotes.
So, okay, here's the one that I wanted to show. The Mortgage Credit Availability Index. So we look at this, and Mortgage Credit Availability Index back in 2011, 85, 105. This just talks about how easy it is to get a loan, how tight lending standards are. So we look at this and boy, it kept running up, kept running up, kept running up. We got all the way up to 185. And this collapse here was the pandemic, the start of it. And we're still only up to 123. So credit standards are 35% tighter than they were up to this point, and yet that was when we saw this giant spike. So we can safely say that credit standards are not loaning people money they can't afford to buy homes that are overpriced. So if we look, this breaks it down: conventional loans, government loans. The government loans did better during the pandemic, didn't fall off the cliff. But I wanted to give you some context here. Here's the expanded historical series. If we go back to 04, that index was at almost 900. Credit was 5 times more available. It crashed down to just over 100, and we're pretty much just over 100. So none of what we are dealing with has anything to do with credit standards. So if we're thinking that, hey, we have people not qualifying for loans, they're making a down payment. They have historically exceptionally high average credit scores. So they have skin in the game, they have good credit and debt to income guidelines that didn't exist previously, so that they're all borrowing within standards. So none of credit availability has anything to do with home prices. There's people out there that make good money, that have saved a down payment and have good credit histories and are qualifying for mortgage under historically tight credit guidelines. So when you look at it within that context, if and when there's a turn in the market, it's not going to be because of the loans that were put on the books, because the underwriting guidelines have been quite strong. So from that perspective, if we're looking for a decrease, we're going to have to find a different reason for home values to stop increasing going forward.
No, great explanation. Got a couple other questions here that are pretty easy to address. So I think beneficial to a lot of people out there. So any difference in DTI qualifying for a 15-year versus a 30-year, Josh?
No, it's just your debt to income is going to be higher on the 15-year because you're going to have that payment be about 50% higher. And people are kind of shocked by that because historically it was like, hey, if you can do the 15-year, payment's just a little bit higher, but you take 50% of the life of the loan off. That was true when interest rates were 5.5%, 6.5%, 7.5%, because so much went to interest in the early going that when you're making that big extra principal payment, it would shave off a lot of the loan. When I started in 1995, our rule of thumb was a 15-year was going to be about 20% higher payment, but 50% less duration. Now you're 50% higher for that 50% less duration because the interest is such a small portion of your mortgage repayment. So if you have the extra money available and you're comfortable with investing, I would recommend taking the 30-year and investing the difference.
There you go. And it also helps if you have a much smaller loan amount too, right? I mean, if you got $100,000 loan amount, it's a little different than a $500,000 loan amount. I guess that you still have the 50%. It's still 50%. Yeah. Yep. I guess the number's not quite as shocking, but yes, when you're coming from a higher loan amount. Let's see here. I saw another good question here. Oh, Ethan is asking, if I waive my home inspection, can I still do an inspection for informational purposes to get it ready fast to be rented out after close? Yeah, I would say, I mean, the answer is you essentially waived it. So if you stuck by the contract, the seller could say, no, you can't do a home inspection. But I would say most people are willing and able to, are fair and reasonable, and will let you do that. So just, have your agent contact the listing agent, just tell them what you want to do. And I don't think there's any reason you shouldn't be able to do it. But you have waived it. So in the inspection period, in theory, you don't have it. But I would say I've never had an issue in the case that's happened. We've always been able to do one. All right. Getting some questions here. Josh, what do you see?
Michael threw in here a simple one, and we've covered it a couple of times. For any consideration on 40-year loans under the qualified mortgage guidelines, they're not allowed. So it's a non-QM loan. If you go over a 30-year amortization, you'll pay worse terms. The worst terms will offset any minimal benefit you might get from a 30-year amortization. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, nor do I see it being an exceptionally good idea.
All right, there you go. Let's see here. Josh, do you follow Pace Morby and Creative Financing? I'm assuming those are YouTube channels. I'm not 100% sure. Do you follow either of those, Josh?
I do not.
All right. Well, maybe you should. Maybe they have a different opinion than
Maybe,
you.
maybe they take a different approach. Well, the good news is, as we've always said, is numbers never lie. So the numbers are here to back up everything that we say, and time will tell. So I am aggressive and willing to go on other people's YouTube channels and make public wagers against their disinformation. So if that becomes an opportunity, we're willing to do that.
Oh, it's so good. I love it when people like I show like people are like, hey, you should do collab with this person. And I start typing back my response, like my real thoughts. And then I get to the end and I'm like, you know what? That's a dick move. So I erase it. Then I start thinking again. I'm like, oh, should I really put my thoughts about that person in there? And so I erase it and I don't put it, right? I've grown up, guys. 20 years ago, would have sent that, boop, right out. Now, don't do it.
Hey, you got your first super chat of the day, so don't ignore Mrs. Shelton.
Miss Shelton's put this question in there. I was about to click on it, Miss Shelton, before you gave me $5, but I appreciate it. That's going to buy Josh. Hey, Michael, it might buy him a new shirt, huh? $5.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, about 2 months ago, we went day drinking and we didn't spend any of the super chat money that was supposed to go towards margaritas and 805s.
I thought it was supposed to go to a community fund to help people with housing. And now
all of the above.
Where are we going here?
Go to all of them.
All right. So, Josh, can you explain the process of doing a refi opposed to asking a lender to get rid of PMI? Now, we did address that, but let's address again. Are you saying just to try to get a lower interest rate? How does one make sure there's no PMI on the loan?
So, if interest rates are lower than your current rate and it makes sense to do the refinance, don't bother with going back and petitioning your lender and paying for an appraisal and waiting for their response. Do the refinance, get the appraisal done. The appraisal is going to confirm that you have 20% or more equity in the property and you don't have mortgage insurance. Now, very rarely do we have situations where it's borderline. We can dig into the comps. You call us, you give us your property address, we look at 15 different sources of data, and if they all seem to agree that the value's there, then we can say, hey, the value's there. If we think it's likely to be there, then we can say, hey, let's move forward, but know that there's a chance that it's not. So it comes down to your certainty that you have 20% equity in the home and where current market interest rates are relative to your interest rate. Now, if we get into a weird situation in the future, you have a 3% mortgage rate and rates are at 4%, you would never refinance to get rid of your mortgage insurance. You would always go back and just petition the current lender to get rid of it once you have the equity in the home.
There you go. Hopefully that answers your question there, Mrs. Shelton. If it doesn't, put it in there and we'll get to it again. Thanks for the support. Let's see. Nola 15 says, I'm selling my house while in forbearance. Can I immediately get another loan or will I have to wait to buy? So no, you can purchase right away. I think, Josh, you did have a client, if I remember correctly, that was having an issue getting a new loan because of the way the forbearance reported on the credit, or is that something I just made up?
It was different. We did have that issue, but not in this context. So what I have had people have lenders come back and tell them is you have to be 90 days or 3 consecutive months of on-time payments. You never made an on-time payment. You exited forbearance through the sale. And my approach and take on that is you are also eligible for financing straight away if you bring the loan current. So you didn't bring it current with your own money, you brought it current with the buyer's money. So either way, the lender was made whole and it was brought current. So if you're in forbearance and you are behind $20,000 in payments, if you write your lender a $20,000 check, you don't have to wait and make those 3 on-time payments. So again, if you were my client, I'd want to make some calls and get back to you tomorrow and tell you 100%. But I would say with pretty solid certainty, we have multiple lenders that would be willing to make that loan without a waiting period.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Let's see here. So a lot of the stuff we've addressed. If you guys are watching now, you haven't already, we're 140 likes. That's a lot for us. We don't really get a lot of likes. Not many people like us, Josh. So
Ethan does. Ethan just said, thanks for the great content, gave us a cute dog picture and bought me an 805 if you ever part with the wallet.
There you go. I like it. I appreciate it, Ethan. Thanks for the money. Not giving Josh anything.
Is that a Shiba Inu? Is that what do we got there?
It's Dogecoin.
Oh, it's the little Dogecoin dog. There we go. But those are Shibas. I don't think that's a Shiba. It looks kind of like a Shiba, but I don't think it is.
I don't know. Here's the deal. If you like us, hit the thumbs up. If you don't like us, hit the thumbs up. Actually, you can hit the thumbs down. That's okay too. I don't really care.
So Ethan says it's a Pomsky. I think that's a Pomeranian mixed with something else. Is it a
A
Pomeranian
husky.
mixed with a Husky?
Yeah.
How is that physically possible? I don't think that Pomeranians and Huskies can mate.
A Pomsky. Is that how big that thing gets, or does it get bigger than that? That's
It's
like
a cute dog. I
it's a little
like it.
rad, like small dog. I've
So
got 3 kids. I'm never owning a dog, by the
I
way.
was going to say, if you guys play your cards right, we will post pictures of our dogs, but Jeb doesn't have one.
Yeah, I
So
don't
we
have a
wouldn't.
dog. I've got 3 kids. I'll post a picture of 3 kids. It's like having 3 dogs. It's like having 3 untrained dogs is what it's like. Yeah.
All right. Ethan,
Yeah.
I'm still waiting to hear what the other half of the Pomeranian is because I don't believe a Husky is possible with the Pomeranian, although that is exactly what it looks like. They inject into the Husky mom. I like that. That's crazy. This is crazy science. I've never heard of this.
All right. So we're going to need a couple more questions here while we finish it up. We're coming up on 2 hours, as always. Actually, I was going to do a survey here. I'm going to try this in the thing and see if I can do it. So I'm going to say, I'm typing in all caps.
Jeb get his children a dog or continue
No
being
chance.
a mean and evil father?
So should we go live between 6 and 8? Oh, it doesn't allow me to do. Oh, does it allow me to edit these things?
You're supposed to practice your polls ahead of time.
All right. Now, will you talk? Just talk, and I'll type here.
Well, we already went through the Pomskys. I learned my science news of the night. That's all I needed to know. So here, we're going to answer a question while you're going through that. So Christian Junio says, can you explain about applying without tax returns or bank statement only? So we went through this a little bit last week. You can provide bank statements in lieu of the tax returns. We have a lot of business owners that bring in a lot of gross receipts, and we look at their tax return, and after all their expenses, $200,000 of revenue, $10,000 of income doesn't allow them to qualify. We can use the bank statements, generally 12 months. There previously been the offer of 12 months or 24 months. For whatever reason in the market, they're priced the same right now. So essentially, you're going to provide 12 months of bank statements. We're going to average the deposits. We're going to take out an expense factor that varies depending on your type of business and use that in lieu of your income. Now, this way of measuring ability to repay doesn't fall under the qualified mortgage guidelines. So it's a non-QM loan. Rates and terms are going to be a little bit higher, but depending on how much you're putting down and how high your credit scores are, they can still be in the mid 3s. So hopefully that helps. Did you get your poll figured out, Jeb?
I did, yeah. So I asked if people had rather us go 5 to 7 like we've been doing, or 6 to 8. I'm just curious. We might not even do 6 to 8. It's like when I go to the restaurant and I ask the server and I say, what's your favorite thing on the menu? Or what do you suggest, when I already know in my head what I'm probably going to order, and they come back and they say something completely different than what I wanted to get, I still just go with what I want because I'm looking for confirmation from that person. That's what I'm looking for.
I have a friend that used to always get a Sam Adams no matter where we went, and yet would always preface his order with, what kind of beer do you have? And then the waitress would go through the 27 beers that he had, and every time, cool, I'll have a Sam Adams every time.
Anyway, too much, guys. Let's see. I did see a question here we can address relatively quickly. So Shirley P is saying loan went from pre-approved to approved on a new build. Is she finished with underwriting, Josh? Once your loan's approved with the lender initially, are you done?
You're not finished. You are conditionally approved. So very, very rare that loan would come out clear to close, meaning there's no conditions. The conditional approval means that the underwriter says, this loan appears to meet the guidelines, but I need you to provide A, B, C, and D. If your lender's good, it shouldn't be any much longer than D. If you have a lender that's not so great, they can come back with 25 conditions because they didn't package it well for the underwriter. So could be as simple as, we need one more bank statement. We need to source this large deposit that you had in your bank account. But your loan officer should be able to go through that with you, say, here's our conditional loan approval, here are the conditions you need to be aware of, confirm with you that you can provide them, and if so, from here to the end is pretty much a formality. I say that this is a new build, right? She's saying it's a new build. You're still going to have an appraisal. Rarely a problem on a new build, but one of those conditions would be the appraisal. One of those conditions would be the certificate of occupancy, so meaning that your builder finishes the property and it's eligible for financing for you to move in. So not quite completely done, but if they did a good job packaging your loan, and generally a builder's lender is not going to be some fly-by-night that didn't do a good job with it. So ask them to go through the conditions on your conditional approval, make sure you're comfortable with them, and for the most part, you're done.
All right. So Maddie gave us a super chat here for $5. Thank you, Maddie. Comes with a question asking for advice for a seller. So as an agent, you have an agent. I can't really give you advice, but we will talk and just have a conversation here. So condo in Burbank, updated interior, 2 previous offers with buyers getting cold feet. On market for 50 plus days now, 2 price reductions. So I guess my question would for you first is how big of price reductions are we going? So where were you listed initially, and where's your price at the moment? So answer that question. But so getting cold feet, because you said they never got to inspection phase. I saw that earlier. I was reading. I meant to click on your question here, but we're here now. So what is your agent saying? Right? Why is your agent saying there's not activity? Right? I did see that you mentioned that your neighbor sold for $50,000 more than where you're priced, or something along those lines. So there's clearly activity in the building, but I mean, are there other properties in the building that you're competing against, or are there no other properties? You're the only one. Because if there's other properties, then maybe there's something less desirable about location or price or what have you, based on the location of the others in the community. There's a lot of things that could be playing in here. Burbank, you're probably not seeing a lot of inventory come to the market, so I don't think it's that. So you went from 695 down to 675 down to 660. So I guess the question is, what does your agent think it's worth at the end of the day, right? Typically, properties don't sell for one of 2 reasons. Either something's wrong with them or they're overpriced. And neither of those could be the case, but here's what you're up against at the moment. You're up against being on the market for 50 days, right? So now you've got buyers looking at it in an environment where things move very, very quickly. They don't know that you've had 2 buyers in escrow that have fallen out for various reasons that took up part of that time. All they see is the days on the market, and they automatically assume something's wrong or you're overpriced. So you got a couple of different approaches here. One is you can just wait it out like you're doing. You can continue to reduce, in incremental amounts and get closer to whatever fair market value is. It's hard to say. I mean, without knowing the property and knowing the area and all of that stuff, it's really hard to give you advice. I would rely heavily on your agent to figure out the direction that you want to go. I mean, I've had 2 properties that have been on the market, a little bit longer than I feel like they should have in this environment. One went into escrow today. We originally started out at a price of $490. We're going to end up settling for a price of $480. So that was 2% drop. And, should it have been priced at $480 to start? You could argue that. But we just tested the market, right? It's been about 30 days. And so we ended up accepting less. The other one is listed for less time. We've done a reduction on that one, and it's getting activity. It's just a very, very unique property. And that would be my question for you, is that, the size of the property. Is it a studio? Is it a 1-bedroom and that sort of thing? Because those properties are always going to be less desirable than a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom property. You just got less buyers looking for it, and potentially that's what you have. Maybe you have a property that just less appealing to people looking in that market, right? And that's where your agent needs to come in and really be transparent and honest and say, this is, what I believe. And sometimes it just takes longer to sell those properties, and it's not necessarily price driven. It's just people that there's just not enough buyers looking for that sort of thing. So hopefully that makes sense. So you got a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1223 square feet. I don't know in that building if that's how that compares. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you off air though. If you want to email me or something, we could chat tomorrow. Again, we talk as friends and just have a conversation about it. So send me an email and we can chat.
Jeff,
Yep.
Jennifer had a really good follow-up and asked a question, says, is the complex FHA approved? And Maddie answered, he thinks so. Have your realtor check and find out. I can tell you there are a lot of frustrated buyers out there that are only qualified in condo price range, and they're very frustrated by how few condos out there are FHA approved right now. It can be a cheap and fairly easy way to make your property much more marketable in LA County if it's not. And in your price range, it very well may not be. It used to be that almost all complexes were FHA approved. Back after the meltdown, FHA removed every complex's FHA approval and made them reapply and apply for renewal every 3 years. So you have a lot of otherwise good complexes that will be eligible for FHA financing, but are not currently FHA approved. So it could be something that you as a seller could do that would greatly increase your pool of potential buyers.
Yeah, and the MLS now will actually show that information on there, right? It'll show if it matches with the approval, the FHA approved list. Our MLS, our local Southern California MLS, will actually show whether or not it's FHA approved on there. It should, but in some cases it doesn't. So just make sure that, again, that's something that your agent should be putting in the MLS. Either way, right? They should be looking that up. Quite frankly, I mean, it's something I do just because I want to make sure all the buyers that are qualified to buy that property know that that's an FHA approved property, just in case you get in this scenario where you're not finding a buyer quickly or what have you. So I'm looking for one little thing here. Let's see. We'll put that across the bottom. So contact information is there. Email me, Maddie. I'm happy to have a conversation offline and help you answer the question or maybe figure out my insight from looking at it. But I do appreciate you guys being here. 200 people at the end. Appreciate the support, guys. It means a lot. We do appreciate you. Appreciate you hanging in there, answering or asking questions, and allowing us to help others. If there's something you want to know, you're watching this after the fact, put it in the comments. We'll try to get to it. Josh, any parting words, my friend?
No, it's an interesting market. Lots of good and interesting questions. If we didn't get to them, like you said, send us an email directly. We can get those questions answered, whatever you may have. Just keep the good questions coming. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a link scrolling across the bottom now. If you need to get connected to an agent, to a mortgage professional anywhere in the U.S., click that link. You'll get connected. Mortgage professional pretty much right away. Real estate agent takes me a little bit of time because I got to go through my list and make sure that all of those people, because it's more localized than lenders are, that you're getting handed off to the right person. But I will connect you. So again, appreciate the support, guys. We will see you next Wednesday.